Hi beaders, it's me Mandy with Beadwork and Dreams. Hope everyone is doing well. Today I wanted to do a video on attaching snap clasps to, in particularly, peyote beadwork. So I have a couple of snaps here, and they're just the typical, snaps that I believe you can find these in Joann Fabrics. I haven't looked in a while, but I think the last time I was there a few months ago I did see them. So you can sell them, you usually see them on clothes like shirts or pants or anything like that. So it's just another type of closure. This is a bigger one. This is a smaller one here. So you can actually incorporate this into beadwork. And the first time I was introduced into using snaps for beadwork is when Shelly Nybacki was a visiting guest artist at the bead store where I work at One Stop Bead Shop. That was about 2 years ago. And I was looking at a lot of her samples that she had on display to sell, her patterns. And I was just really impressed where, how she used the snaps under the beadwork. So, you can kind of like hide a clasp or, a closure. Surprisingly, I can't believe it took me about 2 years to actually incorporate this idea into my own beadwork, but here we go. Finally, I had the not once I had the chance, but I just took the plunge and decided to try it out myself. So gotta thank Shelly Nybacki for that. So I have a couple of bracelets here. Move our snaps out of the way for a bit. Have a couple of bracelets right here. It's basically the same design, and this pattern is on my Etsy. This is called the beaded chain mesh bracelet, because I don't know, it is beads and it does feel kind of like a chain mesh kind of thing going on here, so that's why I called it that. And with the pattern, but as in any peyote bracelet, you can use any kind of clasp that you want. You can use a tube clasp, or make up your own kind of clasp, whatever you'd want to, and excuse me, your peyote bracelet with. You can do that for this bracelet. But for this video, I'm going to show you how to attach the snap clasp onto a peyote bracelet. So this technique can be used for any peyote project that you're working on. If you want to snap a clasp that's different from, let's say, a tube clasp or ball and socket or lobster. So this is just something a different technique. I'm going to show you why I love using snap clasp. I'm going to go ahead and put this one on. You have the bottom part down. Oops. I usually put the bracelet up against myself when I put it on, but can't do that. Alright, so got the bottom part. This is the top part here, and kind of clumsy here. There we go, finally. And it just snaps right in. Like I said, I usually hold the bracelet up against myself, so that way, it's kind of anchored a little bit. But as you can see, it's really easy to put on. You can put it on with just, one hand. And you don't even barely see the clasp. It's under the beadwork. So it kind of has a bangle feel to it, where you don't see clasp. It looks, kind of continuous, except you can snap it on and off. And I'm going to show you this one as well. Let's see. This one has two smaller snaps instead of a bigger one. I used two smaller ones just to kind of match the width of the of this bracelet here. I felt that one big snap clasp might have been kind of, I don't know, clumsy. It wouldn't be wide enough. If it was wide enough, it'd be way too big, I think. Snap in. Second one, snap in, and as you can see, it hides under the beadwork. So this video will show you how to do that. Now, like I said, these patterns, I mean, the pattern is exactly the same. It's just, this bracelet is using 11/0s and a 3mm cube. This one is 8/0, size 8 beads with 4mm rounded edge cubes that I found on Etsy. And I'm gonna post a link to where to find these beads. They're really awesome. The plating hasn't rubbed off, and I've worn this a couple of times. The plating hasn't rubbed off. It holds up very well. So I will include a link if you're interested in purchasing these really cute beads. They come in brass, they come in gold, and then the silver. I don't think I saw them in gunmetal, so I think I just saw them in those 3 colors, and they're very shiny. So I'll include the link for that. So we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so I have one bracelet here. It's already done. It's the length that I wanted. And what I've done is for each of the peyote sections in between the open spaces and the cubes, I've got 6 rows. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 beads in the first row. I'm sorry. 6 beads, like so, of the first column. So you can say each column is 6 beads high. This is a column, this is a row. Okay. Now, when I'm attaching on the clasp to the bracelet, there's one part I like to, at one end of the bracelet, I just like to leave it about 3 or 4 beads high in that column there, as you can see with all the other bracelets here. So that last section of peyote is not going to be as wide as all the other sections seem here. It's not as wide because when you fold and you snap the clasps, you kind of want the peyote sections to kind of meet up and look continuous. You don't want it to look too wide. Like if I made this section as wide as this section, it would have that extra, that extra width there, and it doesn't look as continuous as the rest of the bracelet. So, I mean, it's not going to be exactly perfect, but it looks like it almost matches. Close enough. That's good enough for me. Perfection can be so overrated sometimes. All right. So we've got 2 needles here. I've got one on each end. And I've already added the last row in my peyote. Another thing to mention is that this is done with odd count peyote. I'm sure it can be done with even count peyote. I'm talking about attaching the clasp, but if you're following the pattern to be able to do this, have the open spaces with the cubes or whatever beads you're using in between each peyote section, it has to be odd count, so that way it will line up. If it's even count, you're going to have kind of that staggering, and it would totally just give the pattern a completely different look, and that's not what we're going for. So you would need odd count peyote, and it kind of does help with centering the clasps as well. So what I'm going to do is, since I've added this last row, I worked my needle to get to the bead in the center, and in this case, because I'm working with, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 beads. The row is 9 beads wide, so I'm going to go to the 5th bead right here. So the bead that's right in the middle, I'm going to exit that bead, and I'm just going to pick up one more 8/0, stitch back through that bead, the center bead, number 5, make a loop like so. So what's going to happen is that second bead is going to stand on top of the first bead like so. And I'm going to reinforce this several times because this is what we'll be attaching one part of the clasp to. So you want to make sure it's nice and secure. Now the bead might shift around just a little bit, like right here. It might just shift a little bit, which is fine. Once you put the bracelet on and snap it, it doesn't really matter as long as this is secure. That's what we're going for here. Gonna do it a couple more times. I'm working with 4-pound Fireline, but you can go up to 6, or you could probably even, yeah, you could definitely go up to 8, especially when you're working with size 8 beads with 11/0s, size 4 to 6 pound Fireline will be good enough. Size 8 might be a bit too much, especially if you're reinforcing that extra bead. And if the holes of the beads are kind of small too. I was kind of surprised with this bracelet here. With the this is nickel plated silver. The plating on these beads, it's tough. It's very tough. It doesn't wear off, and I've worn this several times. I've washed my hands, I washed dishes in this bracelet, and as you can see, it hasn't worn off. It's still really shiny. It looks just as brand new. But the holes are a little bit smaller than you'd be used to, that you'd come to expect for just an 11/0 seed bead. Maybe almost as small as a 15/0, I think, because of the extra plating. And you might run into that when you're working with like permanent finish galvanized beads or a Duracoat galvanized bead, that the holes are a little bit smaller, and these holes are even smaller than the permanent finish or the Duracoat. So size 4-pound Fireline is what I used for this, and it's just enough. It's perfect. It's sturdy enough. All right, so I've attached on that one bead right there, and it's centered in our work. I'm not going to use this clasp, this snap, sorry. I'm going to use this one. It's smaller, and I think it's just enough for this bracelet, but I'm going to move this little guy out of the way, and I'm going to bring this one in so I can describe to you the anatomy of a snap clasp. So I've taken it apart, and you have two parts of the snap clasp. You have the bottom part, you have the top part. The top part snaps in to the bottom part, like so. You can tell it's the top part because it's flatter. This little nub right here is thinner and longer compared to this nub right here. It's going to be a little bit wider. It's a little shorter. Also, with the bottom part, you can see it's more rounded. Oh. See how it kind of curves a little bit? And on the inside, where the top part snaps into, I don't know what these are called, and I did try to look that up to see, but we have like a little extra pieces of metal inside, so this kind of gives the top part something to snap into and secure it. So this is the top part of the snap clasp. This is the bottom part. We are going to work with the bottom part first, and then we're going to go in the top part. The top part of the clasp actually stitches in to your peyote beading. The bottom part gets attached to that one extra bead on our peyote beadwork. It attaches right there. Now, I've tried to actually just attach it to the beadwork without actually, adding that one extra bead, just kind of like right there. And I found it to be a little difficult and a little clumsy, and it was not sitting as right because all the other beads are in the way. So this extra bead here gives it a little extra space for that clasp to have enough room to kind of sit there nice and evenly. So that is the anatomy of a snap clasp. This is the top part, flatter. This is the bottom part, rounder. Another thing about using snap clasps is that when you're attaching them, you want to make sure that their little nubs, I don't know what else to call them, but their little nubs right here are facing in the same direction. They're both facing in the same direction when you attach. So if you have this extra bead right here, the bottom part is going to go under that extra bead, and the top part of the clasp is going to sit on top of the peyote. They're both going in the same direction. The nubs are pointing in the same direction. The top part of the clasp sits on top of the peyote beadwork. The bottom part of the clasp sits on the bottom underneath that extra bead. That way, when you put it on your wrist and to snap it, it's hidden. If one of the snaps is not quite aligned in this direction, like let's say this one is under, what's going to happen is that when you try to put it on, you'll find that you end up twisting the bracelet, and that's not what we want. We want it to, lay flat. So again, top part sits on top of the beadwork. The bottom part sits on the bottom underneath of that extra bead. You fold it, it snaps. And the nubs are facing the same direction. I know that sounds kind of, redundant, but when you're working on it and, you get in your stitch happy mode and you're like, oops, what did I just do? That's something to keep in mind so you won't run into that problem where you have to twist the bracelet to get it to snap. We want it to lay flat. Okay. Go ahead and unsnap our clasp. There we go. This is the top part. This is going to stitch right over here. So we're going to put that aside for a bit. This is the bottom part. And it's going to go right underneath of that extra bead. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to treat this like a bead, and we're going to use these holes to our advantage. So the thread is coming out this way towards the bottom. We're going to stitch around this little part right here. So through this hole and under, like so. So the thread is going to go make a loop from one end to another through this bead, and it's going to tie around this little extra space right here. So the thread is actually going to, when we're done, you're going to see it fall across this side of the clasp. Go ahead and stitch it through. Oops, wrong way. Let's see, which way am I going? Okay. Actually, with the nub facing up, you want to go down through one hole. The thread is going to go through the back side and then up. And then pull. Oops. Okay, there we go. So on this part of the clasp, we are only going to be working with these two holes right here. This bead is going to sit on this space. this right here. So it's going to go around like this, through the bead and through the back side of the clasp. So we're gonna, since we come through the second hole, we're gonna go through the bead again, making a loop, pulling through, go through the first hole, pull, come up through the second hole, through the bead. Sorry, the tube clasp was in the way for no reason. He is not part of this tutorial. So we've come through the bead, stitch down through the first hole, stitch up through the second hole, like so. And I'm going to flip it over so you can see the thread right there. It's going along this space right here between these two holes. Down through the first hole, up through the second hole, and through the bead. Okay. Oops, needle came through there. Oh. Got caught up with something. Oh, there we go. Okay. So you can see I'm kind of reinforcing this a few good times so I know that clasp isn't going anywhere. Snap is staying nice and secure. Down through the first hole, up through the second hole, through the bead. So there. I think that's pretty good. And you don't have to worry about a lot of thread through here. I might do like maybe 5 or 6. I think I did about, the most I've been about maybe about 7 times through here, which is still all fine. I'm gonna get a top part of our clasp here, snap it in to the bottom part, and it still snaps just fine. The thread does not get in the way at all. It snaps perfectly, okay? So, and then once you're done and you're comfortable, just go ahead. Let's see, where's my needle? All right, I'm gonna do one more pass. So this time you're just going through the bead, second bead here that you added extra bead, and back down to the bead that we attached it to, the bead of the peyote work, bead number 5, oops, or whatever the center bead is of your work. So now we're going back in this direction, and here's where you would tie off your clasp. You would tie it off like so. So it's nice and secure. Okay, now we're gonna go on the other side. That part was pretty much the easy part. We're gonna flip our work over. Well, not really flip over, we're gonna work on the other end here. Now remember, the nubs of our snaps have to be going in the same direction, up. The bottom is beneath, on the bottom of our extra bead. The top of the clasp is going to be on top of the peyote. Now, I mean, when we wear it, it's, you know, it's all going to be on the bottom, but since we're working on one side of this bracelet, this is one good way to remember what goes where. So this is sitting on top of our peyote beadwork. All right. So I've got, this is the beginning of the bracelet here, and I've got about an 18-inch tail. This is enough if you want, like, 2 feet or however much of a tail you need to end off your work is fine. But 18 inches is enough for me to be able to attach on our clasp here. So I'm coming out of this bead right here, which is 1 bead below the last bead in the column here. But I'm going to go up through that bead. What I want to do is I want to work my needle to get down to this row right here. I'm sorry, this column. This is the center column of our peyote work, because I want to anchor this right in the center. So I want to find one of the center beads. And I also want the clasp, the top part of the clasp, to kind of go a few beads away from, I don't want it to be so close to the top, because then you'll see the clasp. I don't want you to see the clasp. I want it to be a little hidden. So I want it to be down here a little bit. Okay. So let's see. I think I want 1, 2, 3, 4. I want this one right here. This bead right here. So from the first row here, 1, 2, 3. So this is the 3rd bead here within the middle column. And this is where I want my needle to come out of. So I'm going to stitch all the way through till I get to that point. And that bead is what we are going to anchor the top part of our snap clasp around. We're going to do loops through the clasp and the bead, pretty much the same like we did on the bottom part of the clasp. Okay, so now we're coming to the middle column here. So now what I'm going to do, this is the 4th bead, I want to meet here to the 3rd bead. It's just kind of like make a U-turn, coming out of the 4th, going into the 3rd. So you're just making a U-turn, like so. There, coming out, right there. Make sure that your clasp is still facing the same direction, which it is. Because sometimes you might get a little turned around, your needle might come out through the other end, you might find this, and then you stitch your clasp on the top and it's not going to work. You'll have this going on and it doesn't lay right, or you might twist it. So you want to make sure that the bottom clasp nub is still facing up. Oops. Okay. And again, I know it sounds redundant, like I'm going over and over, but I want everyone to be able to get it and not get too confused. All right, so we're coming out 3rd bead of the middle column of our peyote right here. We're going to be working with these 2 holes of the top part of the clasp. So the thread is going to go right over this space right here. So it's going to loop through this bead and go right over the space. Like so. So up through the hole 1, down through hole 2, and back through bead 3 in our center column. Just that bead alone, like that. I'm going to go back up again. I'm not pulling too tight so that way you can see what I'm doing. Up through 1st hole, down to the 2nd hole, 3rd bead, center column. And when I pull tight, it gets flush up against the beadwork. So up through 1st bead, down through 2nd bead, and then through the third bead. Right through there. You can just follow the thread, see where it's going. Third bead, center column. And pull. And you can do this about 5 or 6 times. Now that we've come out, let's just say you're done reinforcing those 2 holes of the clasp. We're just going to come up through that hole, the first hole again, and we're going to go down. We're not going to go across, we're going to go down. I'm going to call him hole 4. So we stitch through hole 4, so now we're coming out underneath of our clasp. And this is the center column right here, and this is the bead that we want to attach to right here. So we're going to go through that bead. First bead of the center column, up through hole 3, down through hole 4, make sure your thread is not around the nub like I just did. Got tied on there pretty hard. Ah, there we go. So now we've come through hole 4, bead 1, hole 3, up through hole 3, down through hole 4, excuse me, make sure it's not around the nub, and back through. And you could do this as many times as you like until you feel it's like nice and secure. And even with just those few passes, I mean, pulling tight, that's pretty secure. It's on there, it's not going anywhere, all right? So, looks like we have our nubs facing up, both of them, in the same direction, both going up. So, to test it out, let's go ahead and try it on. Make sure we did the right thing. And we did. And there's your bracelet, all nice and finished. And as you can see, we've the top part of the clasp is back enough so that way the beadwork just falls right over, like so. And it looks almost like a bangle. Looks continuous. And that's how you would attach a snap clasp onto peyote beadwork. Now, I haven't tried it with herringbone, like a flat herringbone stitch yet, but I'm pretty sure this, the technique, the idea can be implemented with, any other flat beadwork, as long as you're, tying around, going through one bead to anchor your clasp. Pretty much the same principle as we do with peyote. I'm sure it can be done with any other beadwork, but this is how you would do a snap clasp on peyote. Like I said, for the full tutorial on how to make this particular bracelet, I have it on Etsy, so you can go ahead and check it out. I'll include it in the links below. And now that we're happy, we can go ahead and tie off and make knots and secure our work, and we have a finished bracelet. So that's how we would use snap clasp, and there are all 3 bracelets nice and finished. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something new, and if you have any questions or any concerns, do feel free to let me know. I will talk to you all in the next video. Have a good one. Bye bye.